It's August again in fantasy football. This month, more men and women will go draft than ever before in our country's history. With prize pools at record highs, multiple fantasy players will become millionaires this year playing the game they love. This month, thousands of drafters will compete in redraft, best ball and dynasty leagues, and with innovative formats, they can look forward to a host of high-stakes competition. It's August again in fantasy football, and under the FFPC, high-stakes fantasy is bigger and better than ever before. Why would you ever settle for less?
Welcome in, everybody, to weekly live draft coverage of the Fantasy Pros Championship here on the FFPC YouTube. I'm your host, as always, Aiden LaCorey. Joining me, as always, Dave Tripoli, and special guest today from Fantasy Alarm, their lead NFL analyst, Andrew Cooper. Coop, thank you so much for joining us.
Dude, thanks for having me. Get to hang out, watch somebody potentially become a millionaire tonight live, talk about ball with the boys. I have to thank you. I thank you for letting me be part of something so special. So
doesn't get any better.
Doesn't get any better, dude. This could have just been some other regular Tuesday, right? How lame would that have been?
Changing diapers and stuff like that. Like,
I still actually had to do that first. But
so did I. I just I was a little late.
Now we're here.
You guys' priorities were set. Football was back on our screen this weekend. We got a lot of news notes from the preseason. Unfortunately, we have a lot of injuries to discuss. But like we did last week, let's start off discussing the man of the hour, Brandon Aiyuk. Some more news broke today. Ian Rappaport was tweeting out that essentially he's in agreement with the Steelers on a contract. The Niners and the Steelers have a trade in place. The Niners have offered him a contract, which he has not yet accepted. And basically the ball seems to be in his court. In his court with the Niners contract. And then that doesn't come about the Niners. It's up to them whether they want to execute this trade with Pittsburgh. We discussed it last week on the show, and at that point, last Tuesday, we were still kind of unsure. The Browns were still rumored. The Patriots were in play. To really finalize, it's going to be the Steelers or Niners. I know what Terp's going to say. Coop, I want to get your thoughts on Aiyuk. Where do you think he goes, knowing everything we know, and then what's your kind of fantasy impact where you're drafting him with this possibility of him being a Pittsburgh Steeler?
Yeah, I mean, last time I was on this channel, we were talking a lot of tight ends, and I was talking about how we want guys to be top 2 targets on the team, right? That's like the whole goal here. So once it was Patriots, Freiermuth, or Patriots, Steelers, Browns, or 49ers, I knew one of these tight ends was going to be in a tough spot, right? I mean, like right now, Freiermuth could be a top 2 target of the team. Hunter Henry could lead his team in targets, right? So wherever he goes, just know that even last year on the 49ers, who threw the fewest passes of any team and had Deebo Samuel and had Christian McCaffrey and had George Kittle, he still got over 100 targets, right? So wherever he goes, it's going to take a huge chunk of targets away from somebody. There can still be a second guy wherever he goes. Like perhaps George Pickens can still get his 100 targets or so like he got last year, but it's massive. It's a massive swing. So I don't know, man. I'm hoping he stays put. It's just easier that way. It's what we saw last year. If he goes somewhere else, we got to make a lot of adjustments. And it really is going to cook a lot of shares that we've already accumulated, right? Because we've been – I know you guys. You guys have been drafting all summer. I was drafted in the spring, right? So it's like, I don't know, dude. I just wish they would rip that Band-Aid off and just so we could figure it out.
Terp, I know you want him to stay in San Francisco. You've been adamant about that. If you had just right now, you're putting money on it. Is he a Pittsburgh Steeler week 1 or is he a San Francisco 49er?
I still think San Francisco figures out a way to get it done at this point. I mean, if they would have traded him if there was, if they were too far away, if they had a second option. They clearly don't. I know they're trying to get a receiver in the trade. That's the rumors that are going around. But at the end of the day, Aiyuk's best place for everything is San Francisco. I mean, to me, if he goes back to San Francisco, 4th round Aiyuk, which is going right now in these drafts, it is ridiculous value for a guy who should be going in the 2nd round, in my opinion. So, I mean, you're stealing him right now in these drafts. If you believe he's going to San Francisco, you should be hopping in these drafts right now because once he signs, like we all hope he does, he's going to start moving up to that 2-3 turn, maybe a little higher, with all these unknowns of the injuries that have been happening. So to me, sign the contract, figure it out. You're a Super Bowl contender. If you don't bring back Brandon Aiyuk, is the 49ers really even the best team in that division with just Debo? I mean, the Rams are up and coming. I mean, they got a nucleus of weapons. Sean McVay is a very, very good coach. Arizona's on the up. I mean, Seattle, probably not, but still, not a slouch. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Pittsburgh is just a disaster. He said it. I have so much Pat Freiermuth right now. It would be very, very, very massive hit to the bank account if Aiyuk finds a way to go there. I don't have much George Pickens, but Freiermuth he is, again, if everything stays the way it's supposed to, one of the best values right now in drafts.
Yeah. I tweeted it earlier, man. With so much Freiermuth that I have, it's like that scene in Saving Private Ryan. Where he slowly stabs the other guy with the knife. Like, that's what's happening to my Freiermuth shares. And I just wish it just end it. If you're going to do it, do it. And if
just
not,
do it and just let me prepare a little bit. Don't be waiting another week. I mean, it's just Arthur Smith gives me enough headaches. I don't need any more from Brandon Aiyuk being there. And then who knows who's playing quarterback. I mean, they're going to be running the ball a ton. We know that. We're building that in with Freiermuth. But like you said, you're trying to find the top two option. Freiermuth could easily be the top option there and be one of the best values in fantasy football right now.
Yeah, you make such a good point with the 49ers, right? Where you have to figure out some sort of balance. Like, I know you've got this guy that you believe in and you want to pay him big money, but throughout history, when you go and pay that quarterback money, even when it's a really good quarterback, there's an adjustment period. Look at even Tom Brady, right? Tom Brady went to the Super Bowl 3 out of 4 years on his rookie deal, and then they paid him, and for a couple of years, no more Super Bowls. Not even getting that close. They struggled, right? Russell Wilson went to the Super Bowl twice, and that was during his rookie contract. Once they paid him and the defense fell apart a little bit, no more Super Bowls, right? A lot of these guys go that route. The biggest example for a long time, Drew Brees. Drew Brees was such a big cap hit that he probably hampered his team from going to a lot of Super Bowls.
I'm waiting to see the first team that actually does that. Like, obviously, if you have a Patrick Mahomes, you're not doing that. I get it.
Right.
But like these guys who are just stuck in neutral, like Dallas with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott's a pretty good NFL quarterback, but is he going to win you a Super Bowl? Probably not. Could you get the moon for him? Yeah. And if you could figure out a way to get rookies and develop them and figure that out, I mean, it's the recipe for success. You see it every year. Yeah, there's a Patrick Mahomes who's the outlier, but you look at all these teams, like Jared Goff needs perfection around him, and I like Jared Goff, but he needed that perfect team last year, and they still couldn't get it done. So it'll be interesting to see if a team doesn't. It takes a lot of balls to give up on some of these guys, but you just saw Tua got paid. Guys like that, right. I don't know if they're ever going to make that chance unless everything's perfect around them.
Aiden, if this is your team, are you paying Brock Purdy Tua money, Trevor Lawrence money?
No, it's weird because I think the argument is it's so hard to even find a Tua or Brock Purdy level quarterback. If I'm Purdy, yes.
But you found the Brock Purdy quarterback. He's Mr. Irrelevant.
But that's once every 20 years. It's just
but
you're getting. You also have to think there's so much more that goes into it, right? From a pure foot, it's so easy to just sit here and say no, but then you let him go, and all of a sudden now you don't have a quarterback. And then from a business side, it's all of a sudden your team stinks. You're losing ticket sales. I mean, the only time in my lifetime I can truly remember it is like when Washington let Kirk Cousins go, and they just they used the franchise tag, and look where they've been at, right? QB purgatory, not even, just worse than that, just endlessly searching, and hopefully they have it for their fan base with Jaden Daniels. But I think it's sometimes there's this idea it's way easier to be, no, you just shouldn't pay this kind of middling, maybe a game manager needs the perfect situation type guy, but then you let them go, which maybe on paper is the right move. And then all of a sudden you have 10 years in the QB wilderness. And it's just like, maybe we should have just paid that guy. We would have at least gotten some consistent playoff appearances. So,
were the Vikings any better on the other end of it, though? Just watching Kirk Cousins dig holes and try to shoot his way out of them every week. It's like it's kind of the same thing that Dak did last year. Like, yeah, he threw for 400 yards, but the first few drives of that game put them in such a massive hole with the turnovers and the not converting, right? Like it's just those I don't know. It's a crazy game. And it's on one hand, I can see why the owners would be trying to talk about some sort of QB salary cap, which is never going to happen. But I don't know. It's a tough balance. You better be right, because otherwise you end up like the Giants with Daniel Jones. Like you better have the guy. If you're going to give up Brandon Aiyuk to pay this quarterback, it better be a situation where he can make it happen with whoever. Like Tom Brady was winning with like David Patton, or Patrick Mahomes last year. He had Travis Kelce, a rookie, and then the third target on the team was Justin Watson. That's the guy you give $1 billion to. So
I think some of it is also right beyond just weapons. Look at, you have elite coaches behind them, right? So like with the Niners, let's say if we're talking about Purdy, and we'll get back to the draft in a second. Kyle Shanahan,
talk about in this draft.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan has shown an ability, right, to just win with seemingly any quarterback at his disposal. So it's like Purdy's a tougher, but if Purdy's his guy, you pay him. Let's get back to the draft, though. Jahmyr Gibbs, I was expecting mid-second. That's where he's been going. He falls to the end of the second. That was probably the biggest news of the last 24 hours outside of Aiyuk. Is Jahmyr Gibbs, just a crushing blow to many, was seeing first he leaves with a leg injury, which is just ominous. That was the only report. And then a couple hours later, it's a hamstring, which he has already dealt with. People are assuming it's a re-aggravation of his hamstring injury, which is not great. That timeline, we don't know the severity, but the timeline is anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. So if we hedge it 4 or 5, week 1, week 2, maybe in jeopardy. We really don't know. Obviously, this was a guy who was going in the end of the first pretty consistently before this news. He goes to the 211 today. Coop, what do you make of Gibbs? How nervous are you about this hamstring, saying that it's something he's already dealt with in, I believe, May?
Right. And Mile High Luke pointing out in the chat saying that he's sliding. Mile High Luke, he's a sharp gamer. That's a fantasy alarm guy right there. So he was calling it from the start there. I will say this, that in your average draft, you're not going to get this. This is tight end premium, right? So he's going to go before Laporta, Kelsey, McBride, which is going to put him closer to the middle. I also personally am still in this format, especially when I'm trying to not just beat these 12 guys, but beat a lot of players. I'm going to take him over Derrick Henry in a full PPR format. I just worry that you look at when you look at a guy like James Cook. Now, we get caught up in this idea that Derrick Henry is going to run for 6 yards a carry with the RPO, which he probably will. But the reality is James Cook last year had the third most yards from scrimmage of any player, and he was RB 19 in points per game in this format because his quarterback took a lot of that goal line work. His quarterback doesn't like dumping the ball down when the play breaks down. So Derrick Henry's never been that guy. I just think he's a little too low of a ceiling guy to take in the mid-second. I don't mind taking him around the swing there, but I'm still taking Gibbs ahead. So when you take those guys out in your average home league draft, he is still going mid-second. So for me, I'm still willing to go there with Gibbs, but these hamstrings, dude, I don't know. I'm hoping that University of Wisconsin study that Christian Watson's taking a part of, I hope it cures this once and for all.
So far, so good with Watson. We don't want to put any bad juju out there.
Right, exactly, dude. I'm with you on Watson. You're like, I hope that whatever they're doing over there, and it is kind of interesting for anybody that hasn't checked it out, definitely Google. I'm not going to break the whole thing down, but the idea is that they have this equipment called a Nord board and a few other things that can help figure out if you have asymmetrical hamstrings, one much bigger than the other, which was the case with Christian Watson. They're kind of thinking that if we can solve those things, we can solve some sort of, the way these guys move and get off the line, they can solve some of these hamstring problems, because that's kind of been the number one lingering problem. And it's so much. The hamstring is the real killer in fantasy, because at least if it's an ACL, you can move on and go to replacement value. With these hamstrings, dude, it lingers all year. You put this guy in and he goes and pulls an AJ Green and gets one target while he's playing decoy. Like, the hamstrings really can ruin your season. Like,
especially with the capital you're spending on them. I mean, it's not like you're taking a guy on a hamstring in the 8th, 9th round where it's like, all right, you could recover from that. I mean, you're taking Gibbs over, guys in that range, especially in this format, the 3 tight ends that got drafted right around them. Kyron Williams, if you're a fan, Cup, if you believe in the coach speak that the offense is going to run through him. Even guys like Rachaad White and Pacheco. I mean, you're taking a big risk in the 2nd round. Obviously, the upside's there, but I mean, hamstrings, especially, it's not just him. If it was just him, you would be okay taking that shot. Dave Montgomery, even if he's healthy, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And I think the way people are going to view this in the chat is because you got a lot of FFPC diehards. I know some people in this are in the 9 o'clock draft tonight, right? I'm drafting on Friday, and it's not going to be my only draft. So for me, I look at it and I say, okay, I want a little exposure if he's going to slide, right? For other people, if you're doing one of these, maybe you don't draft a guy with a hand.
Totally different. You said that perfectly. I mean, if you're doing a ton of these, it's worth taking a shot, especially in a contest like this. I would say more Fantasy Pros more than a main event, maybe, just because, main event you're playing for a little bit more during the season. But in the Fantasy Pros, I mean, you're trying to win that $1 million. You're trying to get if you're a multi-entry guy, you're going to always take this shot with Gibbs because nobody else in the tournament's going to have a Lamb Gibbs team. So you're going to stand out just there. And I'm really surprised. This is probably the weirdest draft that we've done in a while. Like Mark Andrews falling where he's fallen.
I love Mark Andrews, dude. I love him this year.
All tight ends and most of these things that we've done, whether it's best ball, main event, or Fantasy Pros, tight ends have been pretty much the 5 of them that went in the second round.
So I'll say this.
Maybe
I'll say this. I want to just address kind of what Terp said, because we've done now 8 of these live. We've done main events live. We've done best balls live. God knows we've seen hundreds of draft boards just throughout the season. This draft, and we always say some of them are more or odder, right? Just there's a lot of crazy ADP movement. There's just unexpected picks. We've had those drafts this year. Some of them are a little more, status quo, what you come to expect. This one is an odd one, just off the bat. Sam Laporte in the first round, which isn't too crazy, but usually it's an early second. We see A-Chain, Henry, ETN all moving up about a half round. Kelsey and McBride are kind of fall to the back end of the second. You guys mentioned Mark Andrews goes at the 310, which you don't usually see. We see Dalton fall to the third. Gibbs is, as we just discussed, at the 211. Rashad White goes a whole round above ADP. So there's a lot of just interesting moves here. What out of all of them, Terp, I'll start with you. What is kind of surprising you, catching your eye the most out of kind of all of these interesting picks?
The fall of Mark Andrews is definitely probably, I mean, if you're not going to mention Gibbs, which we already did, Mark Andrews falling this far. I mean, he's locked at a 2-3 turn. Like, you might see him go to the first or second pick in the third round, but that's it. I mean, he has not fell this far in a draft I've seen in a while. And I look at every single board every single day on Mojo to see, like, main event, Fantasy Pros, and even best ball, obviously, because I'm doing a ton of those, where these guys are falling, and make sure that I'm not missing something. But Andrews at this spot, it is ridiculous value. I mean, that team is really, really, really good. That team I recognize, so they're a veteran of the game, so they know what they're doing. But you give me that start, with Brown, Harrison, getting Andrews where he fell in this format, and then adding Neighbors, who the only reason he's going in the 4th round. We were talking about Neighbors a week ago. I told you, I texted you, Neighbors went 2-7 in the main event. Until he got hurt with that ankle, I mean, he was flying up draft boards. He was getting. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time we draft in Vegas, Neighbors would have got to the 1-2 turn. I think people think it's crazy, but I don't think it's that crazy because the 1-2 turn has so much uncertainty right now. But now those four players to start off, Mark Andrews falling that far is definitely the thing that shocked me the most. But that team is a really, really good start so far.
Yeah. Cool. What's catching your eye besides I would like you to talk, you kind of said you love Mark Andrews, so I'd love to hear why, but is there anything before you get into Mark Andrews discussion that's kind of surprising you from this draft?
Sure. Yeah. So honestly, the thing that surprised me the most is that I'm not really a huge hero or zero RB guy, but I look at this number 7 pick, the bow nose here. Dude, he might have through the first 3 rounds, right? The idea of Drake London is that Kirk Cousins is going to show up and he's going to be the Justin Jefferson target hog. Like, with those first 3 picks, he might have 500 targets, right? Between Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Adams. Think about Devontae Adams. The last 6 years, he's averaged 10 targets a game. And the 2 years with the Raiders, he's had 175 and 180.
Yeah.
Like, how far would he need to drop to not be a top 12 guy in targets? If he drops to 104, if he drops from 175 or 180 down to 140, that still would have been top 12 last year. So for me, I'm in. And then he just took Josh Jacobs, who actually
he's reading your articles, Coop. He's reading your articles.
Dude. He's a subscriber, dude. Maybe that is a shout out, Bo. He does know. So I'm in. I'm fully in with what he's doing right here. But with Mark, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go. Let me hear Mark Andrews. I do want.
Yeah,
to
with Mark Andrews, I mean, like Terp said, if Mark Andrews falls this far in that format, I'm going over to Twitter and I'm typing Mark Andrews' name in there to make sure he didn't get hit by a train or something. Because this, when you start looking around here,
It's
Mark
crazy.
Yeah, it's we're looking for difference making upside, right? You look at a guy like Sam Laporta. I love Sam Laporta. He's like a son to me in my dynasty leagues, right? It's like we love this guy, but the reality is, if you take the last 10 years, Sam Laporta's season last year was in points per game 29th, right? Like the season Gary Barnage had was more fantasy points per game in this format than Sam Laporta had last year. Like it was a tremendous season for a rookie. It was the best season last year, not on a points per game basis, but he stayed healthy, so he ended up being the tight end one. But I mean, Kyle Pitts as a rookie had over 100 yards more than Sam Laporta had last year as a rookie. Mark Andrews has a top 5 season all time, right? And if you want to be really conservative in this format where you're drafting, this is 20 rounds, right? You're drafting 20 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
You could just take Isaiah Likely. And then you have the strongest position possible, and possibly even, honestly, a guy that you can start some weeks alongside Mark Andrews if his role does change. But Mark Andrews is the top dog on this team. He could easily be the tight end one in all of fantasy, and I've seen him have a top 5 season of all time. And he's still, 29 years old. He might still be 28 right now, but 29 when the season starts. It's like Travis Kelce had his first 1,000-yard season at 27. Zach Ertz had his only 1,000-yard season at 28. People are acting like this guy is dust when he's smack in the middle of the age apex for pass catching players. Mark Andrews, like I personally, behind the paywall, have him ranked 1.
Interesting. I like it. I like it in a weekly managed. Me and Turp have talked about it on Fantasy Pros. Is you can just, as you said, the ability to grab Isaiah Likely, and if something happens, and kind of utilize handcuffs a little better in the
weekly managed. Then the fantasy sport, because this is best ball, right?
Mm-hmm. No, this is weekly managed.
Yeah, this is weekly managed. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
So in best ball, I don't have him ranked 1. I don't have Mark Andrews ranked 1 because I'm not going to draft handcuffs. But in weekly managed leagues, I love Mark Andrews. I especially love him, and that's why I say for my rankings typically are for 10 to 12 team leagues, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in those formats, he doesn't even get drafted. And what I've been doing, if I have a draft now, what I do is I do my draft, and I know in this format you have to draft a kicker, you have to draft a defense. All right, I know the rules. So you have to draft a kicker, you have to have defense. But if your league allows you to drop your kicker and you've already drafted, I've done this one of my leagues. I drafted Mark Andrews, immediately dropped my kicker. I added Isaiah Likely because they play on the first Thursday of the season, and then I'll just drop that kicker on that. I'll drop Likely on that Friday and pick my kicker back up. So I have Mark Andrews insurance for the next 20 days. It's like you got to be those little advantages you get. If Sam Laporta gets hurt tomorrow, you're dust because you're not going to pick up. You can't pick up Shane Zylstra and play him, or the Zebra King. Like there's no, you can't pick up. Like, you know what I mean? There's no option. There is no.
You're in trouble.
There's no Isaiah Likely. You're dust.
No.
Trey McBride. What are you going to start? Tip Ryman?
George Kittle. Kincaid, maybe.
But Dawson Knox isn't giving you. It's Isaiah Likely is arguably the only handcuff tight end who will replicate the projection of what Mark Andrews can bring.
There's so few of those situations, and the situations where they are out there, we don't have a guarantee that they're going to be a top 2 target. I mean, the closest you can get is probably Ben Sennett behind Zach Ertz if John Dotson just ends up being a nothing. Mm-hmm. Or I guess Tucker Kraft with Luke Musgrave, but they have so many good wide receivers.
So many receivers.
You're not just you're not one injury away, right? So it is in Dynasty especially, it's the safest. The number one position you can have is have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely in Dynasty.
I wanted to ask you back to Team 7, Coop. You love Josh Jacobs. I think that probably love for him, especially in FFPC, where, as you wrote, he's actually going less than other places. Probably only fueled with the news. I mean, Marshawn Lloyd was one of Terp's guys, right? And then this past week we got this is going to be a redshirt year for him. AJ Dillon Love, which is crazy, but
everything that can go wrong has gone wrong.
And then a minor hamstring injury, but a hamstring injury nonetheless that might make him miss some of this preseason time. Josh Jacobs at the 406. You're loving the value. Explain why.
Yeah, so and again, I wasn't even out on Marshawn Lloyd. I think he's a really fun player. Terp, I'll say that one for you because I mean, there's a lot of hypothetical with that player that he could even be like a. They were saying he could do everything Jahmyr Gibbs could do when they drafted him, right? But what I'm looking at is I'm looking at these teams that have these elite offenses, where as long as the back is serviceable, they can fall backwards into a ton of points. Jamal Williams on the Lions, right, with Gibbs, scored 17 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert last year scored 21. Did Raheem Mostert score 21 touchdowns because he's incredible, or did he score 21 touchdowns because he was on the Dolphins? Did LeGarrette Blount score 17 touchdowns on the Patriots when he was catching 7 passes because LeGarrette Blount is awesome? I know he had a couple cool hurdles, or was it Tom Brady, right? So for me, I look at Josh Jacobs, and I look around in the article, I lay this out, that when you look at what Saquon Barkley got paid and what Jonathan Taylor got paid and what Josh Jacobs got paid, I mean, you can split hairs about guaranteed money, but for this year, they are locked into being these starting backs for these teams. And I know we're questioning about AJ Dillon or Marshawn Lloyd, but you look at those other teams, dude, they're dealing with mobile quarterbacks, right? Mobile quarterbacks that were scoring a touchdown a game. Like Jalen Hurts scored 15 touchdowns. Anthony Richardson scored 3 in 3 starts, right? Like that scares me way more than than Marshawn Lloyd. Sorry, Terp. But it's like, like if someone's going to steal the touchdowns, not only steal the touchdowns, but not dump the ball down as much, which is what happens when you get these scramblers. I don't know. I don't see why Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley go at where do they go here? At the double tap at the swing.
Yeah.
And then Jacobs goes, what, 30 picks later? Yeah. We're talking almost 30 picks later there. I'm not a big math guy without my spreadsheets, but it looked like a long time later.
It's about 30.
Round. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, dude. Mathed it up.
Terp, let's chat is buzzing. We've been beating this drum for months, even before Marquise Brown got hurt. Marquise Brown, for those who aren't following the news, suffered I got it right here, a sternoclavicular joint dislocation, which is not good. He's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks, and that is a injury that is most often seen in car accidents, and it affects blood flow and something along those lines. So you got to be uber cautious with it. Rashee Rice stock is finally booming back to where it probably should be. He goes at the 503. People are saying in the chat, Terp, that's still too low. What do you make of, one, the Hollywood Brown injury on the Chiefs' outlook overall, and then how does it affect Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy?
If you are a Rashee Rice believer and you're new to drafting, like you just started a couple weeks ago, you should be getting in every draft you can right now because his stock is still where it's reasonable to where you can get him and just get him every draft. Me and Theo in a best ball draft we just did 25 minutes ago, it's still going on. We got him in the 6th round. If you can tell me I can get Rice in the 6th round with all the things I've heard in the last 48 hours, I'll click that button every single time because we all know before everything started, before Hollywood got there, before they drafted Worthy, Rashee Rice was a 2nd round draft pick real early in the process. So now you're getting a player that very likely won't get suspended. And if he doesn't get suspended, I mean, you're talking about a value of values right now. And if word comes out that they're definitely not going to suspend him and it's not happening, how high can he get? I would take him over Zay Flowers. I would take him over Michael Pittman. You could make an argument for DJ Moore, Mike Evans type of situation. Definitely not taking him over DeMonta Smith or Malik Neighbors or Aiyuk, but right in that range, I mean, you could tell it's some of the guys above him that are being drafted. I mean, he was a 2nd round pick. Like, if you're going to line up Rashee Rice versus Chris Olave, is it really that egregious to say you take Rice over all things considered? I don't think so. I mean, you got Mahomes versus Derek Carr and probably the idiot coaching staff as can be in the New Orleans Saints. So to me, if you're a Rice believer, and obviously with the Hollywood Brown injury, which is a bummer because I liked him this year, and the uncertainty with just a rookie in Xavier Worthy, you really don't know that much about. I like the kid. I think he's a ton of potential, but you don't know if Andy Reid is going to throw him out there. Justin Watson's going to be annoying. Sky Moore is going to be annoying. And Travis Kelce's still there. Let's not forget about him. So to me, Rice, if you can get 5th round, 6th round Rice now, jump in as many drafts as you can because that number is only to go up. I saw him go in the 4th round of a draft, earlier today. I mean, it's only going to get higher. So the problem with that is like you just got to watch, because you also have to look at there's a lot of people that got Rice a lot cheaper in these contests.
Yeah, chat is buzzing, and thank you to everyone tuning in live. And sorry for cutting you off there, but as chat is saying, as chat was saying, and we've talked about it pretty much on every show, right? Which is like, hey, there's people who got him in the 8th, 9th round when things first break.
And you have to weigh that cost, because like you have to look at it. It all depends on the player. Like certain players, like, Rice, for instance, 6th round's not crazy. 5th round's not crazy. 4th round, in my opinion, is not crazy. If you're talking about like Rice getting up in the 3rd round, the cost you got to outweigh depending on like the 1 versus 1 and your team structure and all that stuff. But I mean, love the player, and if he doesn't get suspended, I mean, you saw what he could do last year. And Kelsey getting a year older, the unknown with the rookie, the real Drek behind him with Tony and Watson and Moore, who we all know can't get it done.
Yeah, with Rashee Rice, the craziest thing is that the best thing he did in college was contested catches. He actually led that class in contested catches in the final year of college. Last year, he didn't even really have a ton of those, because he was a rookie and he was just coming up, and there's still the bag of tricks. But what they did do is the Chiefs led all teams in wide receiver screens. Only the Chiefs and the Dolphins threw more than 50 wide receiver screens. That's free money in full PPR, right? Yeah. And if you add tight ends to that mix, the Chiefs threw 17 more screens to the wide receivers and tight ends than any other team. They love that stuff, man. And if this guy can figure out the contested catch stuff, he could be the next my upside comps, because we always jump out the upside comps, right? Like nobody wants to hear your floor comps, because it's like guys that we forget about. But my upside comps for Rashee Rice were guys like Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins, where not particularly fast, but every other part of his game is rock solid, and he can make the contested catches, and the route running's good, right? So the upside's there if this guy can get his head on straight and fend off the rest of these guys, man. And I'll tell you, with any of those chest injuries, like it's not just about the broken rib or the joint. Once that cartilage gets all jammed up in there, man, dude, you can't even sleep at night. If you sneeze, tears.
Painful.
It's brutal. And then you come back out. You have to, like, if he comes back out early, like we've seen so many times, you get hit, boom, right in the chest again. I mean, those things can go forever. So we'll see. I don't know too much about the sternoclavicular in this exact one, but I saw somebody in the chat basically saying it's a dislocated clavicle, which sounds pretty rough.
Yeah, that sounds brutal. As people in the chat are pointing, the latest Rashee Rice won in this format. At one point, he went at the 10:04.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So
people always say, like, why do you draft early?
Yeah.
Why do people do these drafts right when the contest's open? If you are a volume player, there's a great advantage to do it. Even if you're a 1, 2, 3, you buy a 3-pack of these teams, it does pay off to do one of these early, just because if you can figure out just the landmines that we've just seen this week, but figure out a way to get a 10th round Rashee Rice, I mean, your advantage over everybody else compared to what else you have on your team, like, it is so ridiculous.
Yeah, Ian Rappaport said something this week. He was on a show, and I think it might have been the Marquise Brown injury. There was some injury he was discussing. It wasn't jest, but he says, I don't know why anyone would draft in fantasy like before like the first week of the season. And I mean, there's a ton of people who do it, and I was listening to that and said it's a little bit tone deaf, because think about all the people who are drafting purposefully early to try and gain like an advantage, because they feel as though I trust myself to pinpoint these guys who are going to rise up. And yeah, you're going to have to deal with unfortunate injuries, but we saw last year, Puka and Kyron, there were people on this show who were hyping them up early. 2 years ago, Pacheco, right? He was one. I remember one of the first times even kind of hearing his name was on one of Balky's High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. A guest was saying, I'm taking every time in the 20th round. Like, you have these people who are drafting in April, May, June, early June, and they're finding these values. Coop, we talked a lot about Rashee and the upside. Obviously, Xavier Worthy's rising because of this. He goes at the 701 tonight, wide receiver 37. Can you just talk a little bit about the impact that the Brown injury could have on Worthy and giving him an increased opportunity?
Yeah, and just to your other point on when to draft,
Yeah.
here's my thought process. If you draft now, you can also draft later. But if you don't draft,
1000%.
Exactly.
now, you can only draft later. Look, so if you have one hometown league and that's it, draft on Labor Day.
Of
Absolutely.
course.
But if you're like us, dude, I was drafting the moment the best ball drafts open. So we're always
So was
drafting
I.
February, March. I don't care. You know what I mean? It's like that to me, it's a different contest, right? This is a contest I'm having against these people, and I got contests that I'm having against people all year long because I love fantasy football. So anybody that says stuff like that, they can eat it. That's my take on that. So but my take on Xavier Worthy, I mean, I was with you. I was in on Marquise Brown. It was obvious what he was doing. I mean, they didn't come out and tell us that he was taking a 1-year prove-it deal to get a lot of targets and potentially get a ring, right? That was 100% the plan. It was the same thing Juju Smith-Schuster did. Juju came and signed with the Chiefs 1 year, $7 million, and he got paid $30 million by my Patriots in one of the best deals in a while. Shout out Bill Belichick. That was great. But he signed 1 year, $4 million. We know what he's doing. He was trying to prove that he could stay healthy, which unfortunately, this is kind of a freak injury. He wanted to prove he could stay healthy, and I'm sure they sold him on that. I'm sure they said, hey, you want to get paid next year? Because he's still only 27 years old. They're like, if you want to get paid big time next year, come here and we'll fire you a bunch of the highest quality targets possible from the best quarterback in the league, and you could potentially win a ring, and then you'll get a bag of money from someone else next year. That was the plan. And with Xavier Worthy, they knew that. So they said, we're going to have this guy for 1 year. We'll draft Xavier Worthy. Hopefully he learns from Marquise Brown, and then he's the guy next year. Well, if this injury is serious and it lingers, Xavier Worthy's got to be that guy right now, probably in a field stretching role. I imagine they're still going to have somebody that hopefully Rashee Rice steps up and can really block on run plays so that we don't want to see much of like the Justin Watson type guys out there. But I mean, there is room for high consolidation among the top 2 wide receivers on this team. And I say 2 because Noah Gray quietly plays a ton of snaps, right? Like a ton. I think he played 60% of the snaps last year. So there's not room for 3 wide receivers here. There's room for 2. So I'm hoping it's Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy, but I wasn't drafting much Worthy before this injury because it scares me when the team uses a second tight end that much, right? Like somebody has to come out. You're not taking the running back out when you put in Noah Gray, right? Who comes out of the game? It's the 3rd wide receiver. So that's why I was worried before. Of course, in best ball, he's the fastest guy there's ever been. So you got to take a little bit, right? But now that Hollywood's banged up, now he becomes a little more appealing. I just don't know if necessarily I'm going to pull the trigger where he's going. I mean, I do like Deontay. On this board, I like Deontay Johnson better. Let's see. I would have taken Deontay Johnson. I would have taken George Pickens. I definitely would have taken Godwin. So I would have taken Christian Watson ahead of Xavier Worthy, the way I have it ranked. But I don't think that's bad value where he went here. What do you think, Terp? Would you have taken him there? Watson or Worthy?
Watson 100 times out of 100.
Silly question. Christian Watson stan right there.
There's nobody loves Christian Watson more than me. So
okay, good.
I mean, Hopkins 100%. I would take him over Worthy. I think Worthy is obviously a talented kid, ton of speed, but I mean, you got a team that's ready to win a Super Bowl now. I mean, they've shown that Justin Watson is a guy they like to put on the field. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to go away. Like, he's annoying. I brought up Sky Moore. Those guys are just annoying. I'm not sitting here saying they're good fantasy players or anything like that, but if Worthy is not getting the job done, not blocking the way he's supposed to, not dropping passes, not running the right routes, things like that, Andy Reid's not going to just leave him out there to play. This is not a coach who's just going to play around with that stuff, and they have enough weapons, with Rice, with Kelsey, with Pacheco to be fine. I mean, they won a Super Bowl with those guys last year. So is Worthy somebody that might be targeting a ton? Probably not. Best ball, yes. Managed, I just feel like he's a headache. Clicking that button is going to be, unless, will I have maybe 1 or 2 in as many leagues as I do? Yeah. But it's I say it a lot and I'll say it again. It's so much harder when you got to click the button. Right. Because Worthy is just a tough click for me.
Right. And you got to remember, this offense is pretty complicated. And Andy Reid is an old school coach in some facets. And Tyreek Hill is a rookie. I think people kind of misremember the starts for these guys. Like in our minds, it's like, oh yeah, Tyreek Hill, they got him. He was incredible, and he was incredible. He was making big plays, but it was a lot of punt returns. There was a lot of big touchdowns. He was fairly inconsistent from week to week as a rookie. He was not an every down player, and as you say, it just takes a little bit of Justin Watson or some of these other guys. Because again, Noah Gray, I'm not saying he's going to play 60% of the snaps again, but if he plays 40, that means that somebody's maxing out at 60. One of the wide receivers, right? The third wide receiver is maxing. You see it all the time with the 49ers. When last year the 49ers had Kyle Juszczyk and Charlie Warner combined to play, those two players combined played more snaps than Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk. The Juwan Jennings in an offense like that doesn't stand a chance, right? Same with the Dolphins. If Alec Engel is going to play 40% of the snaps,
wide receiver Johnny Smith.
Dust, right? Like Jonnu Smith, it could have helped Jonnu, but like Odell knew that sign in there. They talked to Odell and they were like, hey, why don't you come here and just play pass downs and never block? Odell probably couldn't have signed that contract.
Sign me up.
Yeah, couldn't
like
have signed
he had a lot of other offers out there.
Exactly. So it's like that's what happens when the fullback comes in, is that there's already, it's so difficult to have 3 fantasy relevant pass catchers on the same team. You know what I mean? Like last year, according to Pro Football Focus, no team had 3 players get 100 targets, right? If you take all the wide receivers and tight ends and put them in one bucket, right? The highest scoring third target on a team that didn't miss any time, because like I guess technically Justin Jefferson and Deebo Samuel were the third target on the team, but they weren't. The highest scoring third target on the team that didn't miss any time was Gabe Davis, and the next highest scoring was Brandon Cooks. I spent too much time staring at that screen trying to like.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Texans, because based off what you're saying, somebody in the Texans, one of those 3 guys who their value right now, Tank Dell's the cheapest in round 5. I mean,
and that team uses a fullback.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant segue for me. I bring out my notebook.
I didn't even know your segue. We didn't talk about any.
I was gonna talk my.
You kind of laid it up for me, and I just put it out there for you.
Let's go look at Team 6, because actually they have DJ Moore and Tank Dell. We'll start with the Texans. Obviously, try not to overreact to preseason, but interesting from preseason was Tank Dell only played in 3 wide receiver sets. Nico Collins and Diggs played 100% of the starter snaps, and they were the ones out on 2 wide receiver snaps. Let me fix the draft board. The Bears had 20 starter snaps, of which 10 routes were run. Keenan ran a route on all 10. DJ Moore ran a route on 7, and Odunze ran on 6. And then if you also want to talk about the Bears, also their tight end usage is Gerald Everett outsnapped Cole Kmet. So I kind of wanted to, it was the general segue to both those. And Coop, you just brought up the kind of the lack of targets for that third option. You have 2 teams with arguably 3 elite receivers in some people's eyes. What are you making of the Texans and the Bears and the preseason impact? That I know the Bears are a little easier, because I'm sure some people are going to easier bracket. Hey, Odunze is going to be kind of that guy left out. But the Texans are a little bit harder. That gap between Dell and Diggs, I mean, it's Nico Collins is stable in the 3rd round, but that Diggs and Dell variance has changed from draft to draft. So if you could just kind of give me your thoughts on those 2 wide receiver rooms, and did preseason week 1 affect that at all?
Yeah, for me, I don't think it's going to be that hard to figure out.
Okay.
First of all, we finally got a great comment in the chat. Mike Mercado says Dave Turp has bad takes.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it, bro.
Finally,
I
someone with a stone correct take.
Thank you. Love that. I love when people come in the chat and say some nice stuff about me.
See, now the thing is, Turp writes that down, and he'll bring it up in like 3 years.
Don't worry.
That's billboard material. That's
I'm going to watch this show over. I'm going to write it down, see what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and I'm going to find Mike on Twitter and make sure I get fantasy receipts to retweet it.
Perfect. So yeah, for me, it's pretty easy. Tank Dell, like if you want to make an argument that everyone loves to make, and the cop out is to say, oh yeah, in best ball he can have explosive plays. Absolutely, go for it. But for me, I'm looking for guys that are going to be every down players. We already know that Andrew Beck plays fullback. We know that Ben Skowronek plays fullback. He's wearing number 26 this year, folks. The beat writers are all saying, hey, this guy plays a little fullback. We run an offense with a fullback. He's wearing 26. He ran a route out of the fullback position during the preseason game. Dropped it pretty badly, but nonetheless, he was back there. So I look at it and say this: Nico Collins is the split end. He is going to be an every down player on the outside. He's 6'4", 215 pounds. Like, he'll be out there every play. I think what they're going to do with Stephon Diggs is the same thing that teams. It's a copycat league, right? Cooper Kupp has the best season all time in fantasy football by playing slot and running the 4th most routes from the slot of any wide receiver in the league that year, and then staying on the field and going out wide for 2 wide receiver sets. CeeDee Lamb has the 3rd best fantasy season of all time, which was last year. He ran the 4th most routes from the slot of any player, and then he stayed on the field for like 200 snaps out wide. I think Stephon Diggs is going to be in the slot for 3 wide receiver sets with Tank Dell out there. When you get down to the goal line to the 2 wide receiver sets, you bring on the Andrew Becks of the world and the Tegan Quatorianos. Tank Dell's going to come out. I mean, it's so funny to me. Remember the outrage? Remember the outrage when Tank Dell got hurt on the goal line blocking?
It was a
play?
killer.
And everyone was like, oh my God, they're so stupid. Why would you have him do that? And the same people this year are saying to me, oh no, Tank Dell can't come out of the game because he's too good. It's like, what is it, dude? What do you actually believe?
Can't have both. Yeah.
Right? Like, this guy's got a high ankle sprain so bad that his leg snapped in that situation last year. They have 2 guys to do it now. I think he is going to end up being a part-time player. That doesn't mean he's not going to have monster weeks, but in a league like this, where I got to, like you said, Turp, that's the big thing with this league. You got to click the button, not just to draft him, but to put him in the lineup each week. And I don't know. I think he needs an injury to get back to being that every down player. And
you just got to hope when you're in a managed league in a head-to-head format that when you play Tank Dell, he doesn't go nuts. I mean, he doesn't have that best ball because he's going to have plenty of weeks that are, early on in the process, Tank Dell was my guy because he was cheap. And that was just mostly a best ball take before I even started getting into fantasy pros, because in best ball, it makes a lot more sense. But when you got to click the button, he is by far the worst out of the 3. I mean, I don't even think it's close.
I can't do it, and I know it's going to happen. One of Diggs or Collins is going to get injured, and Tank Dell's going to be amazing.
It happens.
I mean, everyone's going to be tagging me. And
the victory laps after injuries are like the absolute worst.
It's the worst, bro.
I mean, the absolute worst.
It happens every season at tight end, where it's like,
look at all the victory laps today when Tyrone Tracy got hurt, and everybody thought he was out for the year. All the Eric Gray people came out of the woodworks. Like, we don't even know anything yet. Like, relax.
I'm the other way. Like, when a guy, when I hate when I fade a guy and then he gets hurt. I don't like that. I'm like, get your ass out there and be bad, so I can be proved correct.
Perfect. I can cut you. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, when Robert
like this, got hurt, fine.
I was like, I don't want it. We don't want that. That's not a win. That's actually a cop out for the other people to be like, oh, you know what? Like, we didn't get to see because he got hurt. It's like that's a
especially the preseason stuff. That's just tilting.
Yeah, that's an incomplete. That's what the grade is for that. So I don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that.
Nope. Coop, what are your thoughts on the Bears? I mean, Odunze obviously well behind DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. Obviously, today's wild fantasy Twitter rumor of the day was Keenan Allen's weight, which I'm not going to personally worry about. But what were your thoughts on their kind of usage in the preseason and what to make Caleb Williams look fantastic in his preseason debut? So what are your thoughts on the Bears?
Dude, that throw on the run, that was a seed, brother. Oof. I'll tell you, I had a take on, Matt Kelly from Player Profile. He always asks for your hottest take. And I threw one out there that people said was way too hot. I said, don't be surprised if Gerald Everett flat out outscores Cole Kmet. And it seems like that take is actually kind of becoming.
I have no idea why anybody would ever draft Cole Kmet.
You got to be outside of your mind.
Yeah. Shane Waldron loves him some Gerald Everett.
Shane Waldron
loves him. It's like you want him for week 17 when he falls in the end zone a couple times. That's it.
Shane Waldron, going back to 2017, when he was the Rams tight end coach, has never had a tight end play more than 75% of the snaps for his team. Not one time. He rotates the tight ends. That year, 2017, his Rams, when he was the tight end coach, drafted Gerald Everett. He brought Gerald Everett to the Seahawks. Gerald Everett has not blocked a day in his life. They gave him $12 million. What do we think Gerald Everett's there to do? Give pointers? You know what I mean? To bring water out to Cole Kmet? They're going to rotate. Mercedes Lewis is also going to play some blocking downs. And not to mention, there's 3 wide receivers that are better pass catchers than both of them. Doesn't mean I'm drafting Gerald Everett. I'm not drafting him either. I'm not drafting either of those guys. And I think what's going to happen here is you're going to have DJ Moore as a star. Keenan Allen is a target machine. And Rome Odunze has to wait his turn. In Dynasty, we like Rome Odunze, but he's now on, I call it the Chris Godwin plan, right? Where you're the third fiddle just like we kind of described with Tank Dell. You're the third fiddle, and then when you get a chance to be the guy that's out there for every snap, then it's wheels up, right? Like him, he was stuck behind Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson for 2 years, and then when he finally got that job to himself, laser show, right? Jackson Smith and Jigba is another player that I like, but what does it
saw
take
last year?
Yeah,
nobody got hurt.
Right,
same offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and Tyler Lockett is the big shout out Tyler Lockett. Nobody's better at avoiding hits than Tyler Lockett.
Seriously,
why does he never get criticism for that?
Nothing.
He goes out there and lies down on the ground. Like at this stage, if that's what he wants to do,
injuries, especially for somebody so small,
yeah, I mean, it's smart of him. He makes a lot of business decisions, but he does it in front of the first down marker at times. Great player. I mean, he's been incredibly healthy his whole career. What does he miss? 2 games his entire career, essentially. Mm-hmm. So, that's the problem is you're betting on a guy to get hurt that has no interest in getting hit. So I don't know. The hope is what you got to bank on is that Ryan Grubb shows up as a guy that has no allegiances to anybody and kind of, pulls the old, blind eye move where you say, hey, I'm new here. Nobody has a job. And then he says, you guys are the 2 full-time guys and you, Tyler, you're going to be a part-time guy. Yeah. Right. Because you can get away with that when you're brand new. It's like Pete Carroll. He has to step back. It's but at the same time, Lockett could be an every down player again, so it makes it risky. Are you guys taking JSN a lot? I could see them doing.
I have PTSD from last year. I was all over him.
Yeah, I will say this. So the thing is, I think he's a good player, and he's going to go that way. And I think he's going to have a better year this year. And I think Noah Fant's going to have a better year because the offense is changing, right? Like last year, correct. Shane Waldron rotated all the tight ends. This year they looked around and said, what the heck? What are these Titans doing here? Get out of here. Go. What is Shane doing with all these guys? Colby Parkinson, get out of here. Will Disley, see you later. So I think they're going to run a lot more 11 personnel, but there's a big difference between better than last year and going to win me $1 million in the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship.
I'll say this. On the Seahawks, obviously DK is getting rightful love and what his role could be. We can go into it a bit if you guys want. The Kenneth Walker steam is building, and I don't think it's really being reflected immensely in drafts yet. He was kind of always in this mid-fifth.
People hate drafting running backs.
But in this draft, we see Rashad White went up around, Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, ETN all half around. We see Tony Pollard rose. It's kind of surprised that
people still scared of Charbonnet. I mean,
but Kenneth Walker didn't play in his preseason, right? Charbonnet was out there, right? Kenneth Walker had look pretty good at times last year, and I don't know, he's getting all the love from the coaching staff. That's just one I'm watching. There was a question in the chat.
Can I point out with the Kenneth Walker take? It's kind of interesting that we sat here and we all talked, the 3 of us, and the entire chat about Jahmyr Gibbs sliding and why he slid. But then David Montgomery didn't get any sort of boost.
No.
Why?
Because people are worried about injuries. It's scary. I think Terp said it once. It's scary taking that guy with the Q next to their name or the O next to their name, even if you're only missing a week or 2.
Yeah. Well, David Montgomery, I mean, last year he got hurt. So in the game he got hurt, he barely played. But in the other games, he scored 13 touchdowns in 13 games. People told me Jamal Williams scored 17 touchdowns in 17 games, and people said to me, "Oh, well, that can't happen again." But then he comes out and scores 13 and 13, so maybe it can. I don't know. It's a good offense that we believe in. I don't know. I think David Montgomery, he's a very boring pick. When you pick him, you don't feel amazing about it. Same with Kenneth Walker. Same with Najee Harris. But that guy's going to be in your lineup every week.
A couple of questions I want to get to in the chat before they get too buried. One was Mike Mercado is asking, back to our conversation about the Texans, about the Bears, of how many times in NFL history has there been a trio of receivers on the same team to each get 1,000 yards? 1989 Washington, Art Monk, Ricky Sanders, Gary Clark. 1995 Atlanta, Eric Metcalf, Terrence Mathis, Burt Emanuel.
I know
2004 Indiana, Marvin, Reggie, Brandon Stokely, and then 2008 Arizona, Larry, Anquan Bolden, Steve Breston. Those are just receivers.
What about 2013 Denver Broncos?
Thomas,
Thomas, Decker, and Welker.
Oh, Emmanuel Sanders, yeah.
With Emmanuel Sanders, Wes Welker, and
Demaryius Thomas
and Eric Decker. Because Peyton Manning threw 55 touchdown passes that year.
2013 Broncos. Let's go. I'll go see. Doesn't have him listed. I thought that was the Welker year.
I got it right. Let's see. 2013
It
Broncos.
was definitely Demaryius Thomas was one.
Okay.
Thomas would have been one.
Welker. So Welker.
They had Julius Thomas too.
It was so they didn't each have 1,000 yards. So they 1,400 for Demaryius Thomas and 14 touchdowns, 1,288 and 11 touchdowns for Decker. Julius Thomas had 788 and 12 touchdowns, and Wes Welker had 778 and 10 touchdowns. So they had 4 guys scored double-digit touchdowns, but not 3 guys with that.
I don't think we've had a crazier Thursday night game for the FFPC ever.
No.
Peyton Manning went number 1 overall in every draft in Friday almost, and every team was drawn dead. No matter how great a season he did, they were all drawn dead.
Fun fact.
What did he put up, 50 points that day? I still remember the draft I was in. I was picking 2. And I played Peyton Manning, who got drafted number 1, and I still won by like 20 points, whatever team I put together. And like when the guy drafted Peyton Manning, he thought it was the greatest thing ever, just because he has the 50 points guaranteed, and then the rest of his team was just dust, and his team just suffered all year because of it.
Don't do that.
Those games are so fun when they blow up. When they don't blow up, not as fun.
Hey, this year we got 2 games for potential votes with 4 really good
Saturday drafts, them Saturday main event drafts. They
really
could be
interesting,
really wild. Like especially if you get stuck like in the 10th, 11th, 12th type of pick, you're not going to usually probably get hurt by anything crazy. But if something like Kelsey goes nuts, Andrews goes nuts, Henry goes nuts, Barkley, Devonta Smith, AJ Brown, they all get pushed up. I mean, you can be building some wild different teams at the end. So them Saturday drafts are definitely ones that I'm going to be looking into.
The other question I want to get to Coop, there was a question a while back, and I don't want to miss it. It's all the way back. It was in the 5th round. Sean Green, or friend of the show, Sean Green, asking
question.
Jake Ferguson. Yeah,
because that's on the team I really like, and so I don't, because he also took Godwin, who I really like. But with Jake Ferguson, I'm okay with the selection. But you have to circle back later and take the highest risk, highest reward tight end you could find. You have to give yourself a shot at some upside. This guy can be a top 2 target on the team. He was a top 2 target on the team last year. The problem with Jake Ferguson is that he runs a 4.81, right? And 40 time isn't the end of the world. We've seen some slower players. Zach Ertz had a single 1,000-yard season. He ran a 4.76, but he needed 156 targets to do it, right? Like, when you look at the players that are breaking off 40-plus yard plays over the last 7 years, George Kittle leads in that stat. He has 16. Travis Kelce has 14. The next highest guy has 7, right? Like these guys aren't breaking off big plays that often. To have that sort of upside to turn those touches into meaningful difference-making upside, you have to have some sort of speed, right? Like George Kittle last year and rookie Kyle Pitts had like 65 receptions. They turned that into 1,000 yards. Last year, Jake Ferguson had 71 catches, and what do you have? 780, not even 800, right? It's like this guy he's exactly fine. And if he were somehow to find a way to 130, 140 targets, maybe he could have series upside. But to me, he's just like if you're trying to win a shout out Fantasy Pros. If you're trying to win a Fantasy Pros like ranking challenge and you get a ton of bonus points for ranking a tight end 9 that comes exactly tight end 9, and that gives you a really good score in some sort of challenge like that, Jake Ferguson, you got to love the guy because he's probably the back end tight end 1 that's most likely to be a back end tight end 1. But for me, if I'm trying to win a ton of money, I need more upside than that. So if I take Ferguson, I consider him to be a placeholder while I look for my playoff tight end. Like, and that's the whole yin and yang tight end strategy. And I have him written up in that exact spot, right? There's been a tight end for 7 straight years that's come from outside the top 17 in ADP to finish top 5.
Yep.
So if I have Jake Ferguson, I consider myself in need of the tight end that's going to win me $1 million. And then we try and find this year's Laporta or McBride or Isaiah Likely down the stretch. Like, that's my only advice is if you draft Jake Ferguson, don't consider yourself done at tight end.
Yeah, I bring up that stat for listeners of the show who've been tuning in every week as we do our live draft coverages. I bring up that tight end stat all the time. And each year it's kind of, I was saying, I don't know. I think always fair is I don't know if I do revisionist history and last year what felt the same and then they always emerge. But like this year it feels really icky. Like who is the person going to emerge? And I always bring up Likely, if Mark Andrews gets hurt, it's the easiest. But after that, it's just kind of gross this year. So we'll get into that maybe a little
bit gross.
Later.
There's some names down there. But
if you could pull up Dominic's
Yeah.
Dominic's comment there was a good one. So he says that Ferg was the highest red zone target tight end last year. Nothing changed that. Oh, he's pretty safe. He is pretty safe, man. But he's safe in a boring way. Like, you need those touchdowns. Those touchdowns are super important to him just being the tight end 7, 8, or 9, right? And the thing is, when I went and took all the tight ends going back to 2000, and we talked about, I mentioned this stat on the last time I was on, so I don't want to get too deep into it, but essentially last 20 years, you've needed either 90 targets or 10 plus touchdowns to be top 5, right? 94 of the last 100. So over 20 years times 5, that's 100 tight ends, right? 94 of them got at least 90 targets, and 6 of them got there with 10 touchdowns without the 90 targets. Banking on touchdowns is a bad idea, right? Like, we need the targets. Now, he can get there to be a top 5 tight end if he gets like 100 targets and scores like 10 touchdowns. Last year, he got 100 targets, but he didn't. And he didn't have the yards, obviously, so he was a back-end tight end 1. I think that's where he lands. And the thing is, if you do get there with touchdowns, just remember, it can be very inconsistent, and you get the rug pulled on you pretty hard. Robert Tonyan finished top 5, and he had that whole stretch
from since.
Right? He had a whole stretch of touchdown. Championship week rolled around when you need your guys to go off so you can win the big money. He had 1 catch, and it wasn't a touchdown.
And no team could ever bench him just because they have that stuck in their brain that, Robert Tonyan, look what he did.
Right. And then you go back and look at it after the fact, and you see, oh, wow, in the Falcons game, they were missing Devontae Adams, and they were missing Alan Lazard, and the Falcons were missing 3 of their safeties, and he scored 3 touchdowns. And when you really start boiling it down, he actually wasn't that good of a start or good player at all. We want targets. We want targets, and we want a guy that when he gets 100 targets, he can have 900 yards, 1,000 yards, right? So that's why when I get in that range, I can't pull the trigger on Jake Ferguson until Kyle Pitts and all those guys are gone. And honestly, even Brock Bowers. I got to just go upside first. It's in my DNA.
I got to ask you guys about 2 less than fun backfields that are kind of developing.
Ask Terp this one.
We got
Please don't bring up Denver. Please don't bring up
Denver. No. Oh, I could bring up Denver. I'm not going to do that to you guys. I'm going to bring up Pittsburgh and Washington to prep you guys. So Steelers, if we're looking at the kind of the snap counts week 1, it was Najee got 9 snaps. Jaylen Warren got 8. It was 4 opportunities for Najee. 3 for Jaylen Warren. Warren was playing all the third down snaps. And then we had in the Commanders, it was another split backfield. I think Brian Robinson just edged out Austin Eckler, but Austin Eckler again was the third down back. Although in Washington, we saw obviously Daniel steal a red zone touchdown, but we also saw an improved tempo. So Coop, let me start with you. 2 gross backfields. Who knows if there's a fantasy winner emerges? Maybe it just stays murky all year. Obviously, in each, there's guys who we have seen have very high ceilings. But what do you make of those backfields? Is there any one name out of them that out of each of the 2 that you're liking more than the other, or are you just kind of staying away?
Yeah, Washington. So the thing with Washington is they told us what they want to do, right? Austin Eckler came out and said, hey, I joined my former coach, right? And this is something people got to realize is that the head coach, the offensive coordinator, they don't decide who's on the field on any given play. It's the position coach, right? You mentioned the offensive coordinator walks around and he goes, you, and you are in the game on this. No, that never happens. It's the position coaches, right? And the position coach for the Washington Commanders is Anthony Lynn, the former head coach for the Chargers. And they convinced Austin Eckler to go there because they're going to do the same thing they did when it was Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon. And Austin Eckler told us that because he loves fantasy football and he loves running his mouth. So he's cool just telling us everything, So that's what it's going to be. I would love that if the quarterback was Jared Goff, right? Or somebody that has no interest in running ever. But instead it's Jaden Daniels. And now you got this mobile quarterback that's going to take a bunch of carries himself. It's just, I'm not drafting Brian Robinson probably ever in any format for any reason. But Austin Eckler, every once in a while, I'll get tricked into taking him in PPR, but he's probably not going to get the target. Like last year, he was top 5 in targets per game. He's probably not going to get there again. And then with the Steelers, I'll take either one of them at the right price just because Najee Harris, the worst player ever to only ever have 1,000-yard seasons, right? 3 years in a row. Typically, that's where fantasy football really throws us for a loop is that we should be talking about Derrick Henry as one of the all-time great players and Nick Chubb. And Najee Harris has been nothing but good. But because of fantasy football, we're like, whatever, he's not even good, right? And then Jalen Warren, we love him on the pass downs and stuff, but they still have Najee. But I'll draft either one of them because I like the Steelers, which seems crazy to say. But I think that Russell Wilson's better than people give him credit for. Sure, I'm going to ask you, say you're on the clock and everybody's gone, and the only people you have left in a tier and you need a running back are Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Who are you taking in this?
In this, Najee Harris. I just feel like he's going to be
best ball is Jalen Warren. Has to be, right?
Best ball is probably a little bit more Jalen Warren because I feel like he will give you a little bit more of the spike potential. But in best ball, I did it twice yesterday. In 2 drafts that I did, I took them both because I feel like you lock up a backfield that should be very, very, very good. And with the draft capital you're putting in, you're not really spending too crazy. Right. I know people look at it like, hey, that's not the right way to do it, and you shouldn't take 2 guys in the same team. But they were my first 2 running backs. So to me, I get one backfield that's locked up, and then I can just pound the RB2 position. But in a managed league where I'm clicking the button, I would much rather click the Najee Harris button. And that's not like, I'm not saying that in an exciting matter or anything like that. There's plenty of other guys that are around that range that I'd rather click, but it's Najee Harris for me.
I've seen people. I saw a draft where somebody kind of put themselves in that spot by only drafting those 2 and then kind of going no more running backs for a while and just committing to starting them both. And I actually saw we covered a $10,000 buy-in FFPC draft last year on Better Sports. Mm-hmm. And some dude did the same thing, but he drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery back to back and said,
he couldn't have worked any better.
I'm starting them both. Yeah. I was like, dude, at the time, I was like, who is this?
You're crazy. You're an idiot.
I was like,
especially the capital you had to spend last year on both those 2 guys because they both were pretty high.
And like the buy-in, it was like 3rd and 4th round.
Yeah, like Harris and Warren, you could tell yourself the story. Like Eckler and Robinson, you could tell yourself the story, I guess. But
it was a $10,000 buy-in league, dude. It's like, who are these?
We've covered a 10K buy-in. There's obviously multiple down in Vegas. Oh yeah, we covered another one. Each of the last 2 years, probably going to happen a third. And 2 years ago, a guy drafted like when Josh Jacobs had his like top 5, top 3 season. And he was going usually in the 4th, 5th that year.
Pretty much called him the stupidest person.
Someone picked him in the 2nd in this 10K. Me and Turp are there, and we're trying to be like, these people are paying 10K. We can't insult them, right? We'll be like, I don't know about that one. I don't care. And look at us, just absolute egg.
He won the league, and Mojo. It wasn't
2 grand yards, was it?
I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, it wasn't. He was just a monster.
But I got to ask you one more kind of murky backfield, but I think it's a little more exciting than the 2 I just mentioned, which is the Titans. Tony Pollard looked really good. Kind of seemed like he had that burst back, this speed back me and Tim fell in love with. He actually sees about a half round bump. He goes at the 709. He was going kind of mid-8th. Tajay, where'd Tajay go? Am I missing him? There he goes. He goes at the 810. He goes at the 810. By now, yeah. They did have a split. I think Pollard just purely basing it on like the tape. You're excited about Pollard maybe because expectations are a little lower. Same question is just how are you feeling about that backfield? Is there one you're targeting over the other? I mean, Tajay played majority of the 3rd downs, but again, Tony Pollard, we're only a year removed from him being a 1st-round pick, and there was a reason why. Obviously, it was the dynamic Dallas offense, but part of that was he looked exceptional when he was in more of that timeshare with Zeke and explosive. Looks like he's kind of regained that. He said that from week 12 on last year, he felt healthy and he looked way better. His numbers backed it up down the stretch. Obviously, all the teams that drafted him were already out of contention by that point for the most part, so people didn't notice it maybe as much. But again, good preseason debut. Coop, what do you make of that Titans backfield?
Yeah, so I was digging for information, and I found a clip of the Titans running back coach. Now, I forget his name, so I apologize. But in the clip, he was rambling like crazy, as these coaches sometimes do when they're in practice. Yeah. But he at the end said something that was kind of interesting. He said, I consider passes, like design passes to the running back touches. He goes, and we'll be counting touches this year, not carries. That's what he said, right? Yeah. So I was like, okay, It's interesting because one guy probably skews a little more rushing, the other one skews a little more passing. But if they're counting touches, they're going to try and get these guys an equal amount of, I mean, you don't say you're counting touches unless you plan to split it pretty even, right? So that kind of brings me so that immediately had me thinking, okay, I want the guy getting the targets. But then I see this article by Nathan Yonke, shout out to him at Pro Football Focus, that talks about how the lead backs typically are the more consistent from week to week, and we saw that virtually every team, the running back that started last year, so just the category of start, on 30 of 32 teams, that guy got more carries. The only teams where where was an exception were the Patriots and the Packers, where their starting running backs got hurt. So now I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, this guy's going to start and he's going to get the most of the carries. I don't know, dude. This is where I got to throw the turf, because I've been rattling around in my brain. Like, I have the information, or at least a semblance of the information. What guy do you take, Turk? If the touches are going to be even, and maybe one guy gets a little more receptions, do we want the guy with the receptions, or do we want the starting running back?
To me, it's Pollard. It's not. I'm not saying that with a lot of conviction. I think it's just slightly. I like them both. I'll take them both, and I really think they're guys that you can build around a team, especially in best ball. I mean, I think they're both going to have their weeks. I think they're both going to get there. I mean, God, if somebody gets hurt, I mean, you're talking about a potential RB1 in that offense.
Right.
But a strong conviction either way. They're two of my highest owned running backs right now, mostly in best ball. But it's just trying to add them because they're real cheap. And when you're talking about 8th, 9th round running backs, I mean, I like to build a lot of my teams with, tight ends, running backs, quarterbacks, or tight ends, wide receivers, and, quarterbacks early, and mix it in some of these values at running back to build depth. And those are two guys that I like a ton. Pollard, to me, he had some juice. I watched a lot of that game, watched it back the first couple series, and it looked like he was a little bit, the better player from what I saw, way better than he was last year, because we all know last year was a disaster for us Tony Pollard lovers. Myself, I said he was going to be a potential running back 1 overall, and that didn't work out well.
I was with you on that, and I'll tell you,
it's hard not to see it.
This high ankle, this magic high ankle sprain fix, the
tightrope surgery.
Tightrope surgery.
Tank Dell again. Another thing
I'm
against
starting
Tank
to
Dell.
wonder. Yeah. I was. So did he have it? Because I mean, like, all signs point to it, but I couldn't find the exact.
I've heard. So me and Turp had said that months ago, and we had discussed, like, hey, basically we said, who are the people who had tightrope surgery for fantasy? And Tank Dell was on some, but then I've been seeing some things that he didn't. And there's just, if there's
I saw
nothing,
a couple reports that he did, but nothing.
If there's nothing,
obviously something came out that he did.
If there's nothing explicit, I've began leaning that unless it was explicitly stated that he had it, which hasn't happened, I'm going to assume that he didn't, because I feel like it would have been mentioned that he had tightrope.
Yeah, the only player that mentioned that word was player profiler, but I think it was somebody doing something like we were and just kind of speculating. Oh, okay, broken leg.
Mm-hmm. The injury he had is. We've been seeing the tightrope, and maybe he elected not to. I don't know. But yeah, the tightrope surgery is bad. It's just another reason to be wary of Tank Dell, which we've discussed.
Yeah, Mark Andrews had it last year, so but he came back during the season, though. He came back during the season to play. So I don't know.
But he's also a little different, because look at the guys who I think we most often I'm just saying this to help you with your time, but I think the truth is speed-based who rely on, their quickness, your cuts. Mark Andrews has always been a lumberer, right? So I don't think the tightrope surgery is going to be as impactful, even if it slows him down a bit speed-wise.
Yeah, and who looked terrible last year coming off it as well is Darnell Mooney. Looked awful.
Yeah.
So I mean, and the other flip side of it is that. So I talked to Dr. Jesse Morse because we're at the expo, and I was like,
everyone's favorite Twitter doctor.
Yeah, everyone's favorite. I grabbed him. I was like, what's the deal with this tightrope surgery? And he basically said that if you have a high ankle sprain that doesn't have the broken leg, they usually don't do it. But they might if it's a ligament type thing to fix. If you have the broken fibula, then they can do it and you can come back, but then you have that hardware in your leg. If you have a broken tibia with the high ankle sprain, your season's over. So the one thing that he pointed out was that Jalen Hurts had the surgery back when he was in Alabama, and then he injured it, and then they had to take that hardware out. So now we're talking about a situation like we see with the Liz Frank injuries, where like Julio Jones and Marquise Brown, like during the season, you get hit the wrong way or you take a wrong cut, and this stuff is getting dislodged, and now you have to have surgery again. Like that's just another thing that I think about with this stuff, where it's like, okay, this guy has like, you know, some sort of a bungee cord in his leg now. You know, I don't know, man. It's such a new surgery.
It's tricky.
I'm not a doctor.
Alabama was the one. I mean, it's fascinating when we look back on how much Nick Saban and Alabama impacted football as a whole. Like just little things, like the injury tent, they were the first ones. But the first, I think, at least that I can remember. Now, granted, I was in high school still, but where tightrope surgery was in the like lexicon was with Tua. When Tua got hurt in college, he was the first one. And so Alabama, I know, kind of pushed it. But it's something to watch. Like you mentioned, the Liz Frank injury, like Herbert's dealing with that right now. I know it's a little less fantasy impactful, but that's he's going as QB20. But just kind of that Chargers offense as a whole, because his re-injury risk is incredibly high by all accounts. So there's just I mean, we've had all these hamstrings that we've discussed. We talked about Hollywood. We talked about Gibbs. Neighbors has ankle sprain. There's a litany of guys who still have injury risk from last season. So it's just something to monitor in drafts. I wanted to get back to the draft real quick, though, because Coop, we only got you for like 10 more minutes. Team 1 made 2 interesting picks to me here, as interesting as they can be in the 14th, 15th round. One of your guys that you're really high on as a dart throw late is Antonio Gibson. So I want to hear your discussion there. So if you could talk about that, but then after we go through Antonio Gibson, so I don't forget, I do want to actually talk about Gabe Davis, who had some really sneaky good stats in his preseason debut. But Coop, please, floor is yours to kind of discuss why you're high on Antonio Gibson as a value here in the 15th round.
Yeah, this boils down to what we talked about earlier, and Turt mentioned that when you're drafting now versus later, you do different things, right? And for me, when I get deep in these drafts and I have a team like his where I potentially need running backs to play, like fill in for me while I'm finding, like if you go hero or zero RB, you need running backs that you can put in your lineup while you're finding those waiver hits or doing the trades or doing whatever. Antonio Gibson, and when you look at that backfield, it is actually fairly certain, right? We know Ramondre Stevenson's one. After him, they paid Antonio Gibson to come in and play on third downs, maybe take advantage of this new kick return scheme. After that, it's JaMychal Hasty and Kevin Harris and a bunch of nothing. And if Antonio Gibson somehow isn't the guy and JaMychal Hasty is, well, guess what? JaMychal Hasty is not getting drafted. Kevin Harris not getting drafted. Like the 4 running backs that are going to be on the roster, we already know who they are. There's nobody floating around there in free agency. The Patriots are not trading for a running back. Like it'd be the most ridiculous move in a bridge year to trade for a running back. Like Antonio Gibson's going to have a role, and if Ramondre Stevenson gets hurt, now he's the starting running back for an NFL team, right? So for me, I look at it and I'm saying, okay, if I'm going hero or zero running back, and I need to have a guy that I can throw in my lineup and not give me a zero, like, you know, all the people drafting Kamani Vidal and all these other guys that might not even play. Like if you need somebody to, like, obviously you want to have tons of upside on your bench, but if you need somebody to go into your lineup, I don't think it's crazy for Antonio Gibson to fill in for a bye week or even potentially start for you while you try and pull off the zero and hero RB. I think people forget that you don't just punch running back completely. Like you still got to find running backs and you need guys to play for you while you look for them. So Antonio Gibson, he also goes cheaper on this platform than any other one by about 20 picks. And this is a full PPR format, which is the best one for him. So if you're not set up now, go over, use promo code YouTube25, and they'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more, and you can get in. Like if you like, I've got articles up there now that you know, I've already tweeted them out, but I'll tweet them. I'll attach them on the bottom of the FFPC link there. I went in and I pulled ADP for RT Sports, NFFC, ESPN, Sleeper, even Underdog, even though it's best ball, you name it, and Yahoo, and I compared them and found players that are going cheaper on this format than any other format, and I narrowed them down to players I actually like, and then I put them all in these articles to help people that want to play over here. If you go to my article, you can use my promo code, but while we're on your show, we use your promo code. How about that?
Yeah, we can shout out your as long as they're using a promo code. You can use promo code Coop if you want. Just use it.
It's a lot easier to remember too.
That it is.
Yeah, but yeah, I got all those write-ups there because I go through and I'm like, hey, you know what? If I'm going to be drafted on different platforms, let's see where we can get an advantage, right?
Yeah.
If you like Josh Jacobs like I do, this is one of the cheapest platforms to buy him. David Montgomery, you saw it in this draft. He goes way. Dude, David Montgomery,
607.
on David Montgomery on like Yahoo goes like pick like 29. Like it's just night and day where you play for where these guys go.
Yeah, that ESPN and Yahoo ADP is always kind of a whiplash when you're coming over from any high stakes like contest at the FFPC, and then you get there and like bang. Terp, I wanted to ask you about Gabe Davis. Adam Leviton had a tweet. He was talking about how Gabe Davis had sneaky good numbers on the Trevor Lawrence. There were, I think, Lawrence and the starters played 10 snaps. Davis was on the field for all of Lawrence's snaps. Tied for the team lead with Brian Thomas, who had a good debut with 5 routes run. And on Lawrence's 4 throws, Gabe Davis received 2 of those targets. So again, very small sample size. Christian Kirk didn't play in the 2 wide receiver sets. It was Thomas and Davis. Gabe Davis, as gross as it is, people have been waiting on a Gabe Davis breakout now for maybe this is 3rd time's a charm, and now you're getting him at the price in this 14th, 15th round. You were a Christian Kirk guy earlier. We haven't discussed this Jaguars receiver room, and basically Christian Kirk maybe isn't playing in these 2 wide receiver sets. Brian Thomas has historical numbers coming out of college that don't correlate to fantasy success. Somehow Gabe Davis gonna get some love, or are you still a hater?
I'm not a hater. He's just not a guy that I'm
You're a hater.
A ton. I mean, they clearly see something in him. I'm a Brian Thomas guy, and I'm definitely a Christian Kirk guy. I don't really look into the preseason that much. I mean, Christian Kirk, to me, is becoming a really, really, really good value. I was taking him earlier.
601 today.
A ton. I mean, you're telling me 6th round. I mean, you saw what he did a couple of years ago. It makes a ton of sense. Ridley's out of town. All those targets are going with it. And Gabe Davis, we know, is a wild unknown. There's going to be those spike weeks, but there's also going to be those weeks that you think you're going to start him in that A+ matchup, and he's going to go 0 for 0, and he's just going to be a total non-existent out there. I don't hate Gabe Davis. He's more of a best ball pick to me. He's a guy that I'll take a little bit in a managed league, but I'll take upside of Ingram, who I love, and I'll swear by for the rest of my life. To me, he's not going high enough in these drafts. And Kirk and Thomas are just my favorites. So I guess you could say Davis is the 5th option on this team for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying that with Davis before. Just slow field stretcher. What's the appeal?
Okay.
I love the Jaguars offense this year. I think they bounce back in a big way, but I think it's going to be more of the ETN, Ingram, Kirk, and then Brian Thomas at the end of the season could really emerge.
Also, if you don't like Christian Kirk, my advice to you is to mosey on over to the sports books, to the player props, where most of the books are saying he's going to have 75 yards and 75 receptions and 900 yards, and be the guy.
And all those unders.
Bet the unders, yeah. If you don't like him, that's what I always tell people that are like all over me, being like, "Oh, this guy sucks," blah blah. It's like, I mean, if you don't think Mike Evans is worth his ADP, Vegas says he's going to have 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns.
It'd be an easy bet if you don't like it.
It's an easy bet if you don't like him, right? There's a lot of those out there where it's like, same thing with like, I don't know, like the AJ Browns of the world. It's like you have a lot of outs if you bet under 1,300 yards, but pretty much the experts of all experts are saying this guy's going to be the guy he is.
Yeah.
Again, So.
Coop, I know you got 2 minutes left, so please, first, Kenny, if you could let us know just where to find all your work for those who don't know, where to follow you, and then any lasting thoughts you have for this format before you head on out of here.
For sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Coupe Fiasco. I always tweet out all my free stuff. It's and all my articles are at Fantasy Alarm, which makes it easy for you. If you want all my thoughts on virtually every player I like, I did the write up for that player, which we're talking hundreds and hundreds of players. My ultimate tight end guide is in there. I do a set of rankings I call dynamic tier rankings, where I not only put guys into categories by upside versus floor, but I also color code them red, green, yellow based on whether I'm taking them at ADP, whether I'm not taking them at ADP, or whether I'm taking them ahead of ADP. Like if you like what I talk about here, you can get all my thoughts in the draft guide, which is available now, the Fantasy Alarm draft guide. So go check that out. Absolutely. And here's the only other thing I want is want you guys to get me back on here to do another one of these before the end of the summer, because dude, I just love talking ball.
We got you, man. We got you.
Having the board up there and the money on the line. Let's
sign the contract, just like Brandon Aiyuk. Just sign the contract.
How about this?
Find me the highest stakes draft.
We'll text you right after this. Me and Turp were literally discussing. Yeah. We had a phone call. We have 2 open slots left for our draft card. We'll get you on one of those.
Okay, find me the highest stakes.
Will you be in Vegas this year?
No, I'm not going to make it out for that. But I'm doing a couple. So if anyone wants to watch me draft one of these this Friday on the Fantasy Alarm YouTube at 1:00, me and Theo Greminger are going to team up and do this exact league. And we're going to win it. And I'm going to have $1 million. And then, or $500,000 because I got to
split. Same thing.
I got to split it with Theo, with all my picks. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. And actually, I guess one last thing. Sorry, I'm taking all the time. But no. Right after the show, I'm recording with I haven't really announced this yet, but the Dynasty Trades in 5 channel wants Theo and I to do a redraft show, so we're going to do it. So I'm popping on with them right after this to kind of make that announcement. But hey, why not a little pre-announcement? So head on over after you're done here to the Dynasty Trades in 5 channel, and we'll be making some cool announcements. So,
hell yeah, Coop. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate having you on.
Appreciate Turp too, and all Turp haters in the chat.
I love the haters.
Appreciate Turp. So we'll see you soon then, Coop. I guarantee you'll be on again before kickoff in September. So
let's
appreciate you. See you soon.
Okay.
Be good, brother.
Andrew Cooper, ladies and gentlemen, the lead NFL analyst for Fantasy Alarm. Great guest as always, and I'm sure we'll be having him on sooner rather than later because, as I said, we have only a couple more of these left.
Not many left. We're running out of time in August. I mean, we only got 3 weeks till the season starts.
We got
crazy to even say out loud.
Terp, we got for those trying to figure out when we got our next live draft coverage. Tomorrow, you and player profilers Bradley Stalder are drafting live in the best ball tournament. Sunday at 7, we got a main event coverage, and I'm sure we'll have you won't be on, I'll be on. I'll have a special guest who has not been announced yet. Next Tuesday, we have a draft at 9 p.m. in the FantasyPros Championship. We can announce Abib Agbatoba, 2-time winner of the event, is coming on. Abib Agbatoba of 1st and 15. And then we got 2 more Fantasy Pros, a couple of main events, and then we got our 10K League in Vegas, and that's going to do it for our live draft coverage in 2024. But this draft is still going on, Terp, and we got a couple rounds left. But I want to ask you, Remy LeBeau, who actually drafted live, I think a week or 2 ago, on the HSFF Hour, friend of the show, he drafts in the Fantasy Pros Championship. Kamani Vidal was a pick that got a little buzz in the chat because Kamani Vidal, by all accounts, is going to get cut. So that one's iffy. But he turns it around with Eric Gray, with the Tyrone Tracy injury, who, despite it not being as bad as we feared, is probably going to miss time. Eric Gray looked good in the preseason. Yeah. Will Shipley looked good in the preseason. Plus, Will Shipley's wearing number 39, which just fits him perfectly.
Sure does.
I like those. Not talking about Vidal, but Eric Gray and Will Shipley are 2 young dart throws that I like in late in this draft.
Eric Gray is definitely a guy that I'm very highly exposed to. A little bit later, I got him, in a bunch of spots, and especially it's looking good now. If Tracy does miss some time, I don't take victory laps when it comes to injuries, but it's good to have a couple shares of this guy because if Tracy's going to be out a while and Gray continues the preseason, you saw him week 1 and he looked really good. I know he's playing against backups. I know all that stuff, but he looked good out there and he was getting some positive press early in camp. So like that pick, I think Shipley's just a better player than Kenneth Gainwell. So being a Philadelphia guy, I don't know if it's going to work into fantasy success, but we all know Barkley, he's not 100% all the time. And I feel like whoever that running back to is going to have value. And if I were to bet, I'd say Shipley. Vidal there's a lot of teams that are just very confusing to predict this year. The Chargers are definitely probably leading the pack because there is not a single soul on that team that you could sit here and say, I'm confident in them in fantasy football this year. Herbert injured. The running back position, Edwards banged up, Dobbins coming off the injury, Jared Patterson getting some pop, Josh Palmer always hurt, Lad McConkey hurt, DJ Chark coming from the dead. There's Quentin Johnson, playing into the 4th quarter. It is a very, very tough team to pick to target, but taking a shot on a guy like Vidal, if he gets cut, guess what? Doesn't hurt you in this format. It's not like a best ball tournament when a player like this is going to get you zeros all season. So he's worth taking a shot. You can just cut him. and pick up Jared Patterson week 1 if you really want to. And it doesn't hurt you in any way. Could there be some guys around that you could have drafted better? Of course. But that's the one thing in a managed league versus a best ball league is you have the ability to cut players. So it makes things a little more better if you make mistakes.
Question in the chat. Sean Green saying, will I be in Vegas? Hell yeah, I'll be in Vegas. Me and Terp will both be in Vegas. Come say hi to us. Just look for the incredibly tall person. And obviously, you guys know Terp's face. He'll be drafting. So come say hi to us for all who are going to be in Vegas for the FFPC live events. Terp, guy you were high on. I feel a little bit vindicated if I'm not going to take a victory lap
not anymore.
Too early, but Jermaine Burton.
Okay, I was going to say, I thought you were talking about somebody else. I thought this was going to go in a negative way. I thought you were going to bring up Jelani Woods.
Oh, no, I'm not bringing up Jelani Woods. I'm bringing up Burton because we had talked, obviously, about Andre. Again, still not getting the name right. We talked about basically, does the Bengals wide receiver 3 have any value? And we had talked about who that is. There's a lot of people. I mean, Jermaine Burton, I think, touched the 12th round at some points. Yeah. If you were purely surfing the stat lines, oh, wow, Jermaine Burton, 3 for 82 and a touchdown. But no, he literally looked like he was the 8th receiver on the field. Only really played the 4th quarter. That's a little bit of a tough situation because obviously Jamar Chase was not at practice today. He's been doing kind of one of those, like a hold in, but he didn't show up today.
Whatever you want to call it.
You assume these guys are always going to end up playing. It costs them a little bit too much to not. But iffy situation, T. Higgins does not have the best injury history. No, I'm sure there was people who were hoping Burton would get some legit playing time as maybe even a wide receiver 2 at points this season. Doesn't seem like it's the case based on preseason week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still betting on the kid. I mean, I'll still take Burton.
Yoshivas.
That's way easier. I would have definitely said something totally not even close. Some names I don't even try to pronounce because, it just is no. But Burton is, I think he's a talented kid. I mean, it could take a while. It could take an injury. It could take Chase just playing hardball and not coming into camp. I mean, we talk about these two, but let's talk about the 2 guys up top, Chase and Lamb. Like, neither of them are back yet. And neither of them, we don't know if they're in football shape. We don't know if they're ready to get out there and play. And they're 2 of the top 5 picks right now in fantasy football. Yeah. So if Chase holds out or Lamb holds out, you're talking about 2 guys that are getting drafted here that could be, Jalen Tolbert, Jermaine Burton, Andre Yoshivas,
Brandon Cooks,
and probably some 1 or 2 names that we don't even know yet that could be, moved
Jake Ferguson, Mike Gesicki, right? Does the tight ends get more play?
Yeah, all those guys, the running backs, the same thing. Chase Brown, Rico Dowdell, guys like that, Zeke in some ways. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the top heavy guys. And I think T. Higgins, he's not the model of consistency. So, it'll be interesting. It's still Burton for me. Jalen Tolbert is one of the best bets that I've had so far when it comes to just taking players so far. I just feel like I'm surprised he's not going higher. He's having a really good camp. He did not play in the preseason that I saw, which is a great sign to me because that means that the team is pretty solid on him. He wasn't out there with the scrubs without Dak. So he's definitely a player I want to watch as we get to these games. This next game is going to be played because he should be out there, and I want to see if he's taking the next step because I could easily see a world where he's the number 2 on that team. And if he's the number 2 on that team in the 19th round, that team is going to be throwing the ball a ton. It could be just a 6-6 value. My 2 favorite guys at the end of these drafts are Jalen Tolbert and Malachi Corley.
Yep. I will say, I think someone in the chat mentioned it, is obviously we're talking about the injuries are really messing with ADP. Not to a ridiculous level yet, and knock on wood, hopefully it stays that way. There's no major injuries, but you're seeing it impact it. And I'm sure the holdout questions are the closer and closer we creep to kickoff. It's going to really start to build because while we've seen these holdouts, they always seem to work out because it's really not in the player's favor to hold out.
They have no leverage at all. I mean,
yes, but we've seen some of them, maybe you miss 4 games and then you come back. Like we saw that with Taylor last year. Is that a question? And that whole thing, was he hurt? Who knows? You see, we've seen players come back from holdout and be fine. We've seen some who come back and it takes them some weeks to get into game shape, which I think is a little bit of an underrated storyline right now with CD and Jamar Chase.
And the crazy part about Lamb is it's August 13th. he is not falling out of the top 3 in any draft. There's not anybody who's concerned about it.
Yeah, we've seen
he
Chase
is a top 3 pick.
Also,
Chase
Jerry Jones's quotes are not helping anything.
No,
it's not even like they're working on it.
Worse.
Jerry Jones is essentially just, screw you, CD.
Pretty
like
much
hold out
then.
then.
Exactly. Like
daring him
you,
to
we
hold
don't
out.
need you. Like, we'll do it without you type of thing. We're not going to pay Parsons. We're not going to play Dak. We're not going to play Lamb. We'll just figure it out. But like, I don't know.
This is, again, I'll say it. Brees and Bijan to me, weirdly, could be arguably the safest bets out of that top 5, right? CD with his holdout. Chase has a holdout. CMC, eventually, Terp, we're going to get it right and be our kind of lack of shares in CMC is going to actually be a positive. But, CMC, I'm still banking just historically numbers. It's kind of hitting that age cliff. Who knows? They talked about toning down his workload.
I would feel more confident with CMC of fading him a little bit more is if I knew if there was a consistent guy as that running back too, that I could say, oh, he's going to come in and get some touches away.
But if Aiyuk gets traded, it's also just that's going to be more
for the McCaffrey faders. I mean,
so McCaffrey's there. I'm just saying Bijan, Brees, Bijan, Brees, CMC. To me, those 3 running backs.
But even those, like even Brees and Bijan, like I love them both, and I'll draft them in the top 5 a ton. But Braylon Allen looked real solid, and Tyler Algier is still there. So, there's no like we're running back up top that you're just like he got nobody behind him. He's getting 100% of the work, like a Kyron Williams type of situation last year, like. And usually you see that, and that's why people are scared of the running back position, and they're just pounding receivers because they seem to be more safer, and they're just figuring it out with the guys like, Jacobs and Aaron Jones and, guys like that.
Maybe it's on me and I need to adapt or do some legitimate research into it, but I've always had this hesitancy with picking guys super high coming off of holdouts, especially the later it goes on.
I agree.
And I think for a lot of people, they would say, hey, CMC is that guy. But I think the way to phrase it, I don't think there's a clear-cut number 1 this year. Not in that, there's like 3 guys who have a legit shout. I don't think there's that surefire feeling good about it.
I think you make a case for 10 guys to be the number 1 overall pick.
And I think that's a bit much. But, I mean, we've seen drafts Amon-Ra, right?
Amon-Ra.
Let's see. So we have the 5 we already named. Amon-Ra, we've seen AJ Brown.
Garrett Wilson. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy, I don't think it's crazy.
I don't know. I
Jefferson.
Jefferson.
I mean, I don't think because it's Darnold, but they're going to be a bad team.
No, I'm not even saying Darnold. I'm a Jefferson guy, but like a legit, number 1 shout. I think there's even Amon-Ra. I don't know. I see your point though.
I don't think Amon-Ra can get there. I mean, out of the 10 guys, I think they're really small percentages. I think AJ Brown and if you ask me, out of everybody there, the top 5 guys, obviously, Jamar Chase, yes, if he's 100%. St. Brown, I don't think. You
didn't even mention Tyreek. I mean, Chase goes 6 today. Tyreek's there. Yeah. I mean, you could argue. I know he's getting older, but honestly, Tyreek. I'm not going to say for sure because I'd actually maybe for our next one, I'll actually do some more legitimate research into the holdouts and the impact on statistics. But you could argue Tyreek in some ways over CD is not ridiculous, especially in that Miami offense, especially if they can figure out their cold weather stuff just a bit. And CMC's already banged up. He's already dealing with a little thing which you just don't want to have. So we'll continue these conversations tomorrow night because me and Terp will be back. Terp, you'll be drafting live with Bradley
from the 2-hole, so we're going to have all these decisions to be making all over again.
And as I say, we've had him on before. He was on for Fantasy Pros coverage probably about 6-7 weeks ago. If there's a show you're turning into, especially for best ball, I know I hype him up, but Bradley Stats is one of the best guests we've had on in terms of giving you the numbers, and he has them off the dome, just giving you the numbers to back up all the picks. So tune into that tomorrow. Sunday night at 7, main event coverage. Spots are still available in that league if you want to sign up and compete for the million. And then we'll be back in a week with a B-Bag Batoba, 2-time Fantasy Pros Championship winner, to break down a draft. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Thank you to Andrew Cooper again for hopping on the show and discussing all the latest ADP movement, the injury news, the preseason developments. We'll be back again tomorrow night, FFPC Best Ball Tournament. Drafts are filling every day at myffpc.com. Draft more, wait less. When you sign up for a draft, you're going to be drafting that day. We'll see everyone tomorrow night.
See you guys.